Welcome back to Exploring the Spectrum. Today we have with us Dr. Deborah Winking, who is a teacher, author, and researcher who's worked with countless children and families navigating neurodiversity and disability. She's the author of two books, Capable, which was a memoir about her journey raising her son Jack, who was born with a rare genetic syndrome, and her newest book, which received the 2025 Nautilus Award for Books That Make the World a Better Place, and which we will be discussing today, called Raising Capable Kids: The 12 Habits Every Parent Needs, regardless of their child's label or challenge. Welcome, Deborah.
Hey, good morning, Julia. This has been a long time coming, and I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here to talk about something that I think is very important, which is how do you support parents who are supporting these amazing individuals that experience the world differently? To start, can you share a little bit about how you came to write this book?
Yeah, I can. And specifically, we're talking about raising capable kids, the 12 habits, but I can't really talk about that book without talking about the book before it. So my first book was Capable, a story of triumph for children the world has judged as different. And that was a 7-year labor of love, just laying out my parenting journey with my own son, Jack. Um, it is a regular Brene Brown study in vulnerability in that I share all my faults, all the mistakes I made in that process, and my parenting decisions along the way. So that book kind of travels on two levels. One, you're hearing the story of Jack, and you're rooting for him to win, overcome, persevere. And at the same time, that's kind of the upper story. And then the lower story is sort of underneath my parenting decisions and micro decisions along the way. Um, and my hope was to teach through story. I love story. I learn through story. I think many people learn through story. That's why we have a storytelling tradition for millennia. So I wanted that story to teach, and that hopefully, as they're joining in Jack's journey, that folks might say, "Hey, she did that and it worked for her. I wonder if I could try that or this." So that was my conceit with that first book. And I had a amazing, I would say, person who really enjoyed the book, but who nailed me. And they wrote in a review, and I really appreciated it. They said, "Hey, great. Um, Great, this all worked out for you. You're a teacher, you have a string of letters behind your name, and from what I can tell from reading the book, you seem to be annoyingly optimistic. What about the rest of us?" And that actually, you know, uh, caused an itch I needed to scratch, because I knew in my soul that I wasn't some kind of once in a generation autism or disability whisperer, that there was nothing special about me. And the fact that I had uh, was a teacher or had a PhD had nothing to do with it. Matter of fact, those of us with advanced degrees know that many times we are worse at this stuff than those without. So I knew it wasn't anything about me, and I wanted to find out what it what really was going on with parents who raised their kids to be capable. So that started a 3-year different journey that is no longer my story, but the story of others. So I went down the path of doing hundreds and hundreds of hours of interviews and survey research with parents of kids who experience the world in all different kinds of ways. And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just looking at one population or one way of experiencing neurodivergence. So I met with and interviewed parents whose big concern was that their kid who was neurodivergent get into a good college or graduate program. and parents whose biggest concern was that their kid with neurodivergence could make it through a family birthday party, um, and still be able to be at the table. People who were worried that their kids would get along, and people who were worried that their kids would even have the kind of interoception necessary to know when they needed to go to the bathroom. So I wanted that broad range, because I didn't think it had to do with what in the old days we would have called mild impact or severe impact. I wanted it to have to do with decisions parents made, regardless of how their kids experienced neurodivergence. So, my hypothesis was that there's something when parents raise their kids to be capable, regardless of where they are on that impact spectrum, um, they share some things. And in fact, surprise, surprise, found out that that was true. All that research, and it's still ongoing, and it's getting refined all the time, but has converged on 12 habits. And those 12 habits are the subject of that second book. So the second book, not my story. And I love that, because it addresses that earlier concern. What is it about you? Nothing about me. And each chapter, introducing each habit, starts with a story. Because again, taking it full circle, I think we all learn through story. Each chapter starts with a family illustrating, or a family or a parent illustrating one of those 12 habits. So that's kind of the story of how raising capable kids came to be.
When I was reading your book, I really loved the outline of it. So you have that story, it kind of captures your attention. It's no pressure. It's opening up the topic, and then you go into the detail about what it is, like what the habit is, the science behind it, more discussions, and then at the end you have this workbook. Essentially at the end of each chapter, it's reflecting on your own experience, so this could be an interactive long-term read that a parent can go through. What inspired that type of structure for your book?
Well, I did. So I think what inspired that structure might be anybody in the spectrum world knows and who's an icon, and that is Temple Grandin. So Temple, and every one of your listeners probably is familiar with her and her amazing work. She lives right here in Fort Collins, which is where I live, Fort Collins, Colorado. And when I wrote my first book, the story about raising Jack and learning through story and a little humor and all that, she said, don't write that book. She said, get in there, tell him what to do, get in and get out. And Temple would not be angry with me, because she she knows that that is exactly how she was pushing me along. And I said, yeah, but I love story. And so I wrote the first book, but I remember her saying, get in there, tell them what it is, tell them what to do, and get out. And so for the second book, I really wanted it to be more of that kind of really useful guide, friend, or, not necessarily a handbook, but a guide or a resource or a comfort that you could write in, write on. And I remember my publisher, Jessica Kingsley Publishing, they said, do we want to have pages in there? Pages where people could write in the margins. And we decided against that, because I really wanted people to use it, um, not to feel like it was so structured, but still have those one-page guides. Oftentimes, at the end of a chapter, I'll say, hey, journal however you're comfortable journaling. Speak into your phone, write notes into your phone, because I know all of us kind of relate to journaling very differently these days. But that is, in fact, what it's supposed to be, is kind of a personal guide, or support to trying on each one of these habits, reflecting on it, and seeing how it fits into your own parenting.
As I was reading the book, I was taking notes and I was playing around. I'm like, okay, so the order of the habits can be okay, you start with this one. Well, you can't have four without five. The cool thing is that you have 12 habits, and you mentioned perhaps start with number 12. Can you share what number 12 is and why you start off with that invitation for parents?
Yeah, yeah. We put them together and it felt like belief had to be in it. And everything that I learned in all these interviews and then matched with my own story, felt like belief had to be the beginning. Um, and then recognizing that yes, but without habit 12, none of the others is possible. And habit 12 is making mistakes, laughing, learning from them, and being kind to yourself. And that habit has to happen and happen well. So it's sort of a meta habit. Um, while I think the flow really works from starting with belief, we consciously um, kind of front load with folks. Hey, these are the habits. This is the order, but start with 12 and then work back to one. So, for parents, in that one, really talks about the vulnerability in all of us and the fact that I want people to hear every time. This is about discovering the capable parent in all of us. It's not about becoming it because I think we already all have that. We already all have that within us. And it may be just that these habits ignite in you something that maybe had fallen a little dormant, or maybe you hadn't thought about because there's so much coming at us as parents of kids who don't experience the world as neurotypical kids do. That I've talked with so many parents, like, oh yeah, I know that and I feel that, but sometimes in the heat of the moment, I don't think about that one. Or I'm really on this, but you know what? This one's just not me. And so I like starting with 12 because it reminds us all that, when we're okay, our kids are even better. And so puts the lens on being kind to ourselves and ways and specific ways to do that. There's 7 or 8 strategies in that habit about how we can give up or change a little or get a little bit less serious about what we're doing ourselves so as to take the pressure off how we are going through life with our child. Then once we do that, wow, we go back and we can look at and tackle all these other habits, with kind of a humility and lightness. Because one of the other things that I speak about is our kids are resilient. So, you know what? If we mm, don't do one, two, three, four, five of these habits, if we fall prey to what we all fall prey to, which is losing it with our kids are resilient. And when they see us being kind to ourselves, they learn that they can make mistakes too. So it's not so much if you don't do one of these, you're in trouble. Rather, it is be aware of these. And over the course, it's not, did I not do this X number of times. It's over the course of a childhood, over the balance of my child's time with me, was this how I came and showed up for them. So I want to disarm everybody right up front and say, this is not about not making mistakes. In fact, it's about making a lot of mistakes.
And in that process, modeling for your kids how to navigate a mistake and how to get back on the horse and have compassion for yourself. And so it makes sense that this self care habit comes first, and then you can model behavior, provide opportunities for co regulation because you can handle the stress. And I've found number five, the naming your fears and using that vision for your child to tame them, very interesting because when You talk about fake it till you make it. If you really want to believe that a child is capable of something, but part of you's like, I don't know about that. And you said, say the words, send those messages.
Mhm.
How can a parent do that if they still have unprocessed fears about the future and the present and how to navigate?
Isn't that the devil in the details? I mean, we know that the whole idea about name it to tame it, which is obviously a researched habit that is not mine, but what I added to that was the idea that if you have that vision that you've kind of cultivated with your child of what capable looks like for them, you can then use that vision to say, hey, wait a minute, you know what? Yeah, I'm afraid of feeling left out, not included. I'm afraid of my child being rejected. I have this whole compendium of fears. But when I think about what I want for my kid, it's easy if I say, I really know I know my child wants to have a relationship with an animal. He wants to care for animals. He wants to be part of these county fair showing of animals. Let's say that's part of the vision for your child. If I know that, and I also know I have a real fear that my kid will run up against uh, sounds, uh, sensory situations that are going to get in their way, and that those will cause them to maybe become dysregulated and cause a lot of sideways looks and a lot of people saying to me, does he or she or do they really belong here? I can kind of put those aside when I'm thinking, no, what I believe my child wants, my child has told me they wanted, and what we're building is a world where they can meet this vision. I'm going to be less worried about how maybe I experience a couple of sideways glances or people saying my kid can't because I have this vision in mind. And I've seen that work not only for myself, but for countless families I've worked with. Once they know what they think is where their child is going, where their child has said they want to go, or where the vision they've built together, they can use that as a litmus test and say, Yeah, um, this or that might run up against one of my fears, might run up against one of something that makes me uncomfortable, but I can have a little bit of discomfort because I know it's inching my child closer to that idea or vision of capable that we've crafted together.
You talk about having this vision of capable. At first it's the parents imagining what's possible, then you start updating that as the child matures and bring the child's perspective into this vision. What can you tell parents that are just starting this journey who had a highly credentialed, well intentioned professional give a diagnosis and present to the parent what their vision for the child's future is? And it does not include capable, it includes a list of symptoms to expect and behaviors to limit and all of those things that come with a formal diagnosis.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really tough one because I actually, in my first book, I have a chapter called Diagnosis Schmagnosis because um, a diagnosis is as good as the services and supports it gets your child to give them a seat at the table. I am all about diagnosis as information, information, information. But when that diagnosis starts to change something within you, where you're starting to limiting your beliefs about what your child can do, what that diagnosis has done, it has lost its usefulness and I believe needs to be set aside because your child is a child first. So if because of my diagnosis, I can get my kid um, some busing that they need, can get them an aid, can get them a support, can get them therapies, OT. something that they need to have a seat at the table, that's great. But when it starts causing me to say, well, of course they're eating alone in the cafeteria. It must be their autism. It says right there in black and white in the diagnosis, they're going to have trouble relating. Of course, my son or daughter is coming home with school papers completely blank and not done. It says right there in that ADHD diagnosis that they'll have trouble with demands. You start believing it. You start believing what you see in the diagnosis. It starts to change in micro and macro ways how you view and treat your child. Oh, give them less to do because that's what the ADHD's diagnosis says, that they can't handle it. Let them eat in the teacher's room so it's not so embarrassing in the cafeteria because right there in that spectrum diagnosis it says they're going to have trouble relating. So then what happens is what we saw changes the decisions and the actions we take around our child, and suddenly we have this vicious cycle. So, back to your original question, I think use the diagnosis for every support and service it will get you to get your kid a seat at the table. But if you ever catch yourself limiting what you believe your child can do based on the diagnosis, my strong advice is to set that diagnosis aside because in habit 5, and I'm in a 12-part class with parents right now, we do this exercise in making a word cloud in the shape of their whole child. And we stay away from all diagnosis words and we talk about what we see in our child. Instead of saying diagnosis words like rigid thinking, we say strong believer in what they think. We try to describe our child as a child, a whole child. And then we realize when we look at that whole child and all that goes in to being a complete person, that their diagnosis is one small part of that. And that is what I encouraged my child to do, and I encourage the parents of all children I work with to do is in my opinion, and I want everybody to write in or call in and push back on me, but I want everyone to raise their kid to have self-knowledge, to know, but to recognize that that diagnosis is a part of them, but it's not them in their entirety. It it informs, it's useful, it's not their whole self. And I know we have a lot of autism advocates that I work with every day that think of that a little differently. But as a practitioner, I teach bilingual special ed right now. And a few years ago, I was teaching middle and high school kids with autism. And I applaud and want to push with all my might the self knowledge around diagnoses. But I had so many middle and high schoolers who always led with their diagnosis. And that self knowledge is wonderful until it becomes an excuse for limiting oneself. So I would have students say, I can't go I can't go to the basketball games because of my autism. I can't eat pizza because of my autism. I can't, because of my autism, I can't really be in loud places. I said to them, my students, because I was the bully pulpit with them. I said, "Hey, don't tell me what you can't do because of your autism. Tell me what you are doing." For example, I'm trying using noise canceling headphones because I love to support my team. Um, I'm trying white pizza sauces because I love to go to pizza parties. These are ways to talk about how I'm navigating life and not limiting myself. So I guess I fall down on the side of diagnosis for information, but literally lose it if it starts to limit how you believe what your child can or will be able to do.
This touches on something that I was noticing throughout the book. You talked about this broad range within neurodiversity conversation, but your book, the habits are for the entire range of parenting. And particularly what you just described, this diagnosis as information, I think of diagnoses as a compass, not a final destination. Because when you find out what the diagnosis is, that helps you decide what path am I going to take towards this goal, and you're able to navigate life better.
Mhm.
The challenge I see, and the reason why I bring up this broad range, so many young kids, they get this diagnosis of depression, anxiety, ADHD, and they don't even realize that they're limiting themselves. They take on this identity of what this is, and they, read the symptoms, and all of a sudden their beliefs that I will eventually have this symptom manifest the symptom. And you talk about this so beautifully in the book, and I'd love for you to share more about that. This idea that your beliefs impact your behavior and how that can actually change how your child's, diagnosis manifests.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There is some research, and I may not quote this exactly. We'll put it in the show notes, but there is some research that I thought was really interesting. Um, Medical research about how information about a diagnosis actually changed people's performance. Many of their biological markers, they started to manifest the condition because they were told about the condition and manifested difficulties in breathing, difficulties in processing some enzymes. All different kinds of things happen just because of the knowledge. So it led me to think that that's powerful. That brain body connection is so powerful, and how we process the information we get. So I really believe that we need to mine and always look for um, instances of our child showing evidence of or sparks of capability. What did I see? What spark did I see when my child tried to climb up on the dishwasher door that's laying open because as parents we were told their diagnosis said that they would had hypotonia and wouldn't be able to climb or pull themselves at all, and then we see our own child's curiosity pulling them up onto that dishwasher door to look inside to see what's in that yawing cave. Sort of defies what the diagnosis proclaimed was possible for my child. Children are curious. Children want to learn. Look for anything that you see that shows signs of your child moving, pushing, persevering, wanting to do more, wanting to be capable, because those allow you to temper your thoughts. Then you go, wait a minute, the diagnosis gave me a lot of information and was useful, but it wasn't exactly right about that. In fact, my daughter with autism actually reaches out to people all the time. So maybe what else does the diagnosis as just this unitary collection of words to describe a observed phenomena maybe is maybe holds up in the aggregate, but not with the individual child. So by seeing all those sparks of interest, curiosity, and creativity in your own child, you can then kind of temper how you react to and relate to your child's diagnosis.
What advice do you have for parents who they have the diagnosis, they're choosing to scan for what is possible, but they have a hard time allowing their child to make mistakes, that they're still trying to protect them? How can you support parents in understanding the importance of letting go a little bit?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. We were just in our community, we just spent a lot of time talking about that because it's something about if we have more than one child and we have one that experience it's all a spectrum, but if we have one that experiences the world more, as we might call I call them my neurotypies, than another child, it's interesting if we look at our behavior, our kids that if there were labels on them, would be neurotypical, they get so many chances to become good choice makers because they're all, oh, what courses do you want to take? What do you like better? What extracurriculars do you want to be in? Choices come to our children all the time. What I've noticed is our children who are neurodivergent, their opportunities for choice making become constricted. We have these concerns, fears, worries. So we begin to make choices for them. Oh, he'll like this one, she'll like that one. They'll probably get dysregulated if they try this. We end up making a lot of the choices so that then they don't get that opportunity to learn. I I wanted to watch this really scary movie and I was up all night with nightmares. Now I learned, hey, you know what? I don't want to put that in my brain. I chose the salted caramel raisin ice cream and I really didn't like that taste. Now, next time, I'll choose something different. A lot of times when we constrict choice making, what happens is we don't allow our kids to become good makers of choices because they might react by, "Oh, I didn't pick that. I knocked that ice cream off the cone, but I didn't pick it. So I am not learning and internalizing what I need to do next time differently." And so I think for parents, I often use I think I think it's I think it's a credit card commercial, but I talk about, you know, the time it takes to have your child make their own choices, get their own backpack together, realize what happens when they don't show up. Minutes, maybe partial hours, but the look on our child's face when they realize they've done it themselves, priceless, right? Because we want them to own what happens when they make a choice. And that is, there's some pain in that. There's some pain in that. I work with a lot of folks that say, "Oh, I know my child just freaks out if that particular stuffy isn't in their backpack. So I make sure it's in there every day." And so we can say, well, what would happen if you had your child make the choice of what goes in their backpack and then feel that? Would they then, the next time, remember, I didn't like it when I didn't have stuffy elephant or stuffy penguin. So I'm going to make sure I put it in there. And that's all part of raising a capable kid. There's a couple stories in the second book about how we think it's not gonna there's no harm in coming to our kids, um, making sure they don't make mistakes until there is harm in it. So I tell the story of a young boy, and this was during COVID times. He was very talented, and he wanted to be an animator. He identified as on the spectrum. He wanted to be an animator, and he really, knew a lot and thought he knew a lot. But when he didn't want to log on for his high school classes, his mom kind of was okay with that because he was a smart kid and he still passed the test. And when he didn't want to show up and turn his camera on or stay for the whole class, she felt like, didn't want those battles. There's not much lost here. He knows the content. So that habit was developed. And then later that next year, this young man was doing job trials and job shadowing. Um, and because he was allowed to not feel the consequences of all those earlier times of not showing up, he didn't realize when he didn't log on right away for a job shadow or he didn't show up on time, people weren't waiting for him. What were opportunities to have him feel the consequences of his decisions were sort of low cost. They weren't imposed because um, mom came to the rescue. So later, when he had to show up be there. Folks weren't going to wait. He wasn't ready for that. And so there was really difficult cost to coming in and rescuing all those times before. And so what I would say to parents is recognize that all the opportunities you give your child to be a great choice maker and consequence feeler early on will pay off later on when you are not around anymore, and the cost of those choices will be a lot more expensive than they are when they're still with you in your home.
And this ties into a couple of the other habits. You know, you talk about celebrating your child's persistence to help them tell themselves a different story about who they are and what they're capable of, because the world is going to keep giving them all the negative messaging. You know, you talk about rescuing him from the consequences. There's this concept that if you rescue somebody, you have now perpetuated their belief that they are helpless. And that, yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about learned helplessness and how parents can unknowingly contribute to this type of outcome?
Yeah, learned helplessness is so insidious because it creeps in very subtle ways. But learned helplessness for maybe listeners who don't know is when I don't act or delay or choose not to act because I feel like my actions won't matter anyway. And so we work with a lot of kids who get things done for them, and they start to say, it'll happen anyway. It'll Somebody's gonna do it anyway. What I do won't make any difference, so why should I act? I notice parents do parent we parents sometimes, fall into that trap, but where I see it even more is when when we're not able to communicate to others that interact with our child to treat them as capable. So, for example, when I'm with my child, I'm in control. I can set the tone. Hey, I let him struggle with it, that straw getting in his juice box because I know every time he struggles to put that straw in that Capri Sun juice box, that he is turning neuro cow paths into neuro superhighways because that practice, that productive struggle is causing that. But when I'm not with my child, I don't know if the PE teacher is saying, he looks kind of tired. He always shows up kind of low energy. We'll just let him sit on the side because he sometimes complains about PE. Or the the teacher saying, I'll give him the yes, no questions all the time because I know he struggles with um, more challenging questions, those that cause a little bit of cognitive struggle. I think the problem is those things happen lots of times when we're not there. And so we don't know who's kind of lowering expectations or letting our child kind of skate by or expecting Hmm, less than what we would like for our child. So I think it's also important to teach our child self-advocacy skills. So I, as a parent, can say, hey, you know what? If if PE teacher says you sit on the sidelines, ask yourself, is that really what I want to be doing right now? Is that really the best thing for me? Should I give it a try? Should I step out of my comfort zone? Because I think if we don't teach our kids to self-advocate as well, even if it's not us, others can be allowing that sort of attitude of, really doesn't matter what I say because she's going to call on somebody else anyway, to that attitude to slip in. Learned helplessness is a tough one. And for parents, I think it is the path of least resistance to do for our child, but we need to recognize every day that everything we do for our kid that we don't have a plan for phasing out becomes one more thing that they're not going to be ready to encounter when they're not always with us. So I think that really it's the challenge is being able to stop ourselves because who doesn't want an easier, more comfortable, uh, more calm time? It may cause difficulty to say, hey, you know what, we're getting up a little early so you can pack your own backpack. But over time, what is that getting for our child? The challenge is for us as parents is to be able to step back and see that as an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for building neural connections in our kids' brain, um, and not just "Phew, we got out of the house and I I'm going to be on time, or there was no difficulty in the morning. The other thing I want to add to that is that I really feel like we can't underestimate enough how important it is for our child to feel a little bit of not we're not talking about ACE's level of discomfort. We're not talking about putting our child in difficult situations, but give our child problems to solve that they don't have all the information for all the time, because that's what causes that searching, looking, creativity, and builds that kind of resilience that, hey, I did it and it wasn't easy. And that's how we build a narrative of resilience is, you know what, that was kind of hard, but I did it. A lot of our kids are never going to be the first ones done, the best ones done, the best grades, the fastest runner, but they can be the kid that says, you know what, I hung in there and I got it done. I'm strong. And that's what I wanted to raise was not necessarily the best, the fastest, the smartest, but the strongest child.
And I love this line in your book. You said that children who are delayed, they need more challenge,
Yeah,
not less.
that was. Yeah. It's really true, and it's hard, and I this is the one caveat I wanna put in for people who go, "Wait a minute," because I believe in every support, scaffold, and, any modification or accommodation that's needed to get your child to the table. I'm not saying don't provide scaffold supports, um, but we need to be mindful all the time of dismantling those scaffolds, of having a clear plan for fading them, because if the scaffold doesn't go away, if the scaffold is never disassembled, we don't have a child who can take on what they need to. So those scaffolds,
Hold,
those supports, everything that's needed, give them, provide them, but be mindful that they're there and be always testing to see what little pieces you can remove. Well, maybe you do have to pack the backpack in the beginning, but that may be an unnecessary accommodation or scaffold. But over time, you're always looking for the inching towards independence and a more autonomous situation where your child is in charge. So maybe I'm packing your backpack, but you're in charge of putting it in a place where you'll remember it in the morning to grab it. Then as your child matures, maybe that moves into now they're packing everything but their lunch. Then later you're adding the lunch. So, what runs us into trouble is when we put in those very important and very necessary scaffolds and supports, but we're not mindful about feeding them.
this is what you were mentioning in the book, this productive struggle, and it's a balancing act. It's not going too much in either direction. It's not limiting what they do because you think it's going to be too hard, but it's also recognizing when they really are so frustrated that they're no longer learning. So you take a break and you move away.
And that is when we no longer have productive struggle, we have unproductive struggle. And there is a couple, but a great example in the book about this wonderful mom, this wonderful, capable parent who designed a signal with her child, and it was a hand signal that they used together when he needed a break. He was like, okay, I need a break. That's great. Completely back off. But the expectation is we're going back to it. The expectation is not I'm not going to do it. It's we're taking a break. And how long that break is may vary, but that child always knows the person in my life who who knows me better than anyone believes I can do it, and that's why they're saying let's take a break, not saying, "Hey, that was nuts. We're never trying that again." They're saying, let's take a break. We're going to return to this. You can do it.
And kind of goes back to the beginning of this conversation, which is showing your child that you believe that they're capable.
Yeah.
So once your child knows that you believe they're capable, they have a different relationship to the things that you ask them to do or you push them to
Yeah.
do. They know it's not teaching them a lesson or frustration. It's actually for the person that you've created a shared vision that they're becoming.
Absolutely. I think my son, there were definitely many, many times of frustration. And for those, there's some I would do differently. But what my son came away with was the idea is that the person who loves me most in the world believes I can and will accept nothing less from me than people treating me as if I can. Now, we didn't touch on this, but the book gives it a very thorough treatment is that there is a version of capable for everyone. There are as many faces of capable as there are children with neurodivergence. So, you know, one kid's vision of capable may be um, independent living and a, a job in the community. One kid's vision of capable may be sharing their voice using technology where they use their eye gaze to get their voice into the world on the computer. Another child, it may be bringing joy to the family by being part of family celebrations. Another ones might be being in charge of doing all of the internet buying of things for the home on the computer, and maybe taking care of family pets. It may be exploring a special talent that they have. There are so many, many faces of capable, and we have to remember that there's no child for whom we say, "Oh no," the impact of their uh, neurodivergence or disability is so great that they can't be capable. That is something that we will never accept.
Maybe another thing that they're capable of is the student becoming the teacher. In your book, you mentioned your son was going to give a talk about his diagnosis that you've steered away from and you've used different words. And he ends up telling you, you're worried that they're going to see him differently. And he says, Mom, if they're going to think different of me, I think they already
Yeah,
have.
it was amazing. It was one of the most humbling moments in my life, and I still am amazed by this person that I get to walk through life with every day. Because he would say, I remember when this is years ago, second grade, he kept hanging his fingers out of his mouth. The person working with him at school said she was going to put oven mitts on him because it was not sanitary at school. I was so afraid of, and we can all argue that that's probably not something any professional should do today. I was so afraid of that embarrassment for him that I'm like, I lost it with him. You've got to keep your hands in your pockets because they're going to put oven mitts on you. And I remember him look at me, and his speech wasn't all that clear then. He said, Mom, you worry too much. Again, the student becomes the teacher. So maybe all of this to say, and that is, I think it's habit 3 is listen to your child, learn from your child, lean in to their interests because it will allow you to help them build skills and agency. So maybe another meta lesson is listen to your child.
I think that's a really great point to close out our conversation. Um, Really, the invitation for parents to be there and discover what's possible together because nobody actually knows.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're all learning.
Do you have any other final statements for parents, for listeners about raising capable kids?
Yeah. No, no, other than just, you know, most importantly, the most important thing is we want to love the time we have with our kids. And to the extent that I believe and I know for a fact, these habits will help you enjoy your time with your child more than you might currently. It's worth it just for that because it's such a precious gift we have. And in fact, anything we can do to enhance our relationship with our child, that's a win right there. And so I invite everybody to take a look at Raising Capable Kids and Capable, my first book, to see, where it gets you in terms of enjoying life more with your child.
Where can people find you to reach out, to learn more, to
Yeah, we'll put in
order
the show
books?
notes, but you can find me at
Mhm.
Deb Winking at outlook.com. CapableTheBook.com is my website. I'm on social media under Capable the Book, Facebook, and on Instagram. And when folks do send me an email, I answer everyone. So please send in. I invite you to comment, challenge, tell me that you think anything is full of you know what, because I really enjoy working with parents who, just like me, are always trying to improve their relationship with their child.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for joining us, for sharing this, and I will put everything in the show note captions, and I look forward to having you on again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julia. And thank you for what you're doing with your podcast, with your ongoing work. We're all just trying to figure out the best ways of, as you said at the beginning, how we best relate to the amazing individuals that we're all entrusted with in our families. So thank you.
Thank you.